everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome to Thriller Thursday. So for today's Thriller Thursday, I'm going to be talking about the case of Edward Mordrake. Now before I start, I'd just like to say that I mean no offence by making these videos. They're just for educational and awareness purposes. So Edward Mordrake is a man who people suspected was born with two faces. A normal face on the front of his head and a demon-like face on the back of his head. So some of you may have already heard about Edward Mordrake. He made an appearance in American Horror Story, if anyone's seen that, in the series Freak Show. And this photo of him was also circulating at one point. So the story of Edward Mordrake's life has been told many times throughout the years, and modern day researchers have had a hard time pinpointing the actual date of birth and death for him. The first accounts of Edward's existence have actually come from different sources. Some sources of Edward's existence dates back to the 19th century in 1895. And this article was written by an American journalist named Charles Lowton Hildreth. Charles was actually a popular author of science fiction and short stories. But unlike his horror and sci-fi stories, this one was a little different as it was supposedly based on true facts, suggesting he did really exist. Although around this time people did believe that this was just a story and that he didn't exist. This story was actually noticed a year later by a medical encyclopedia called Anomalies and Curiosities of Medicine, and that was in 1896, and the article was actually copied by Charles Lowton Hildreth, but he was given credit for it. So there aren't actually any records to prove that Edward did exist, and the picture shown is just to be believed as a wax model. People think this because Edward would have existed before the time of cameras, but people believe this wax model was actually based on the real Edward Mordrake. Unfortunately, Charles Hildreth didn't live to see the success that his book made, and he unfortunately died in August 1896. And this also meant that he passed away before the publication of Anomalies and Curiosities of Medicine. Despite many people believing that Edward wasn't a real person, there are also so many people who believe that he was real and believe that there is reliable evidence to prove that he is real, despite there not being any records of him. So that was a bit of background evidence on Edward Mordrake. Now I'm going to go into the main story. So apparently in the 1800s, Edward Mordrake was the heir to one of the noblest families in England, and apparently he was actually quite handsome looking at him from the front. But like I said, on the back of his face there was a second face which apparently appeared to be evil. What made this face evil was that Edward was the only person who could hear it speak, and when Edward would cry, this face would have a sinister smile. And then when Edward would smile and laugh, this face would appear angry. It was also believed that the eyes on this face would follow anyone that was looking at it. So like I said, Edward was the only person who could hear this face talk, and he claimed that it would keep him up at night whispering things to him that he thought would only be spoken of in hell. People believed that Edward lived in complete isolation, as he thought this was the best thing to do to isolate him from all his friends and family to keep them safe. People said at times he would beg the doctors to remove this evil face, and he said that he believed this face belonged to the devil. It was believed that due to all the evil things this face would whisper to Edward, it actually drove him mad, and he took his own life at the age of 23. He also left a note behind saying that this devil face should be destroyed, and the note read, "Lest it continue its dreadful whisperings in my grave." And he also requested to be laid to rest in a waste area with not even a headstone marking his grave. So there wasn't actually a medical term for what Edward had back then, but people believe that he did actually have a medical condition where the face was duplicated on other parts of his head. And the name for this disorder, I think this is how you pronounce it, it's dysprosopus, I think. According to studies, people do actually still suffer from this, and people were so shocked that Edward actually lived to the age of 23 with this condition, as other people with it haven't lived past a certain age. The closest case of someone with this condition is an Indian child called Lali, and she lived a normal life for several months until unfortunately passing away. Many people believe that if this was a genuine case, that there would have been more evidence supporting it. Like I mentioned earlier, American Horror Story brought more popularity and awareness to the case of Edward Mordrake. But to this day, no one actually knows whether Edward Mordrake did exist, and if he did, whether or not he actually had a devil face on the back of his head. So that is everything for this case. I think this is going to be quite a short one compared to normal, but I wanted to cover it anyway as it really interests me. If you have any other case suggestions, let me know down below because I'd be happy to cover some more. If you did enjoy, I'd love if you could give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.